Hello and welcome to AMDAS Recruitment's first vlog. You'll have to bear with us, as I say, this is the first one. So my name is Kelly Yates. I'm a recruitment consultant with AMDAS, and this here is Tara Oldham from Cranberry Social Media. She is joining us as our social media consultant, and she works with a number of recruitment companies. So today we will be exploring what's likely to come up in the budget and the impact that that might have on recruitment and the jobs market, seeing as the Chancellor's aim is to set out the next stage to tackle the virus and to save jobs. So, Tara, we've had many discussions on many political topics over the years since I've known you. I think we spent hours on the phone in our own time just talking about this. So it seems like a good idea to put it into a vlog.
Yeah, we thought, why should we just keep our insights to ourselves? We needed to share them with everybody. So here we go.
Okay, now I don't know where to start.
Let's start at the beginning. Well, I think that the most important thing to note is that I think this is possibly going to be one of the most watched budgets for many, many years. I think that everybody has something huge to gain out of what comes out of it. And personally, as you know, my personal opinion is that I really hope that the government use this as an opportunity to really protect people's livelihoods and do as much as they can to not just consider the economy, but consider the financial and emotional and physical welfare of people in general, because I think, you know, that has suffered enormously over the past 12 months. And I do think that this is a good opportunity for the Chancellor and the government in general to sort of, you know, show that they are on our side. So, yeah, that's what I think. We will see.
I'd be inclined to agree with you. I mean, we've already seen a swathe of redundancies up until the most recent lockdown. And I think perhaps the biggest issue that the Chancellor is going to have to address in relation to jobs is the furlough scheme.
Yeah.
Because as it stands at the moment, I think it's due to end on March 31st, as far as I'm aware. There has been a lot of criticism of the Chancellor's handling of the furlough scheme, I think, up until the most recent announcement when he extended it, whereby it was always the case that it was a bit late in the announcement, so companies couldn't plan. There was too much uncertainty surrounding it.
Yeah, lateness has potentially been a theme, hasn't it, really, over the past 12 months? I mean, to be fair, unless you've got a crystal ball, who knows what's around the corner? I think if we've learned anything in the past 12 months, that's something we've all learned. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we were literally changing from one scheme to another, you know, with a couple of days' notice. And it was hard on business and it was hard on people. I think the thing that everybody's going to be wanting to know is when the scheme is going to end. And I think we'd sort of had conversations around this and sort of punted a few sort of dates out there. But after last night, what are your thoughts now? Because essentially from the 21st of June, that's it, pandemic over, according to Boris. So
yeah, well, I think Boris was really clear that obviously there would be the 4 tests to establish whether the next section of unlocking would be possible. As much as the press like to cling on to the word irreversible and kind of throw that around, it's not criticism, you know, everybody wants it to be irreversible, but I think it will depend largely on the data to see what impact each step has on the case numbers and the hospital admissions. So it will be really interesting to see how the Chancellor is going to mitigate that. In terms of dates, I think I've read May as an extension for the furlough scheme, or August.
Yeah, I'm going with August because everything should be open as of the 21st of June. And even though the majority of business should be back up and running mid-May, there's still I think travel and tourism is still a bit sketchy, especially international travel, and of course large scale events won't be opening, nightclubs, etc., etc. So what the other thing to take into consideration is, just because those businesses open doesn't mean to say that furlough is going to end, because like everything, I mean, some of these businesses will have been shut for what, 13, 15, 16 months. You know, who's to say that if they don't start up and they're not at capacity straight away, which I genuinely can't see happening. It could be, as we've seen, even though businesses have started up throughout sort of the last 12 months, it doesn't mean to say that they're pandemic proof, as it were. So I'm going with August.
I think, yeah, I do think August would be sensible. As you were talking, I was just trying to get my head around possibilities, and there's a lot in there. As you say, just because things are reopening doesn't mean businesses are pandemic proof. A lot of businesses are reliant on other businesses because you get supply chains and suppliers, and if one part isn't open, another part can't function properly. So I think August would probably be sensible, as a buffer as well, in case we see impacts on, in terms of case numbers and things going up. I mean, you have to give yourself a buffer, and that's just being sensible. But then to the other side of the argument, you could say, is the job support scheme going to make a reappearance? Because they put a lot of work and effort into that, and they could extend furlough until May, and then we might have a rerun of last year when we saw the idea of the job support scheme taking over from the furlough scheme. And maybe this year it would work, but I don't know. I think I agree with you that probably August would be the sensible option for extending furlough, because from what the medical advisors were saying, we're likely to have some kind of restrictions through winter.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting sort of situation, because I just think that to sort of say that we're going to get to June, things are going to be irreversible, that's it, job done. I mean, obviously at the moment we still don't really have much data on what the vaccine is doing in regards to case numbers, hospitalizations, and sadly deaths. But I do think a combination of that, the summer months, etc., you know, my hope is that we'll get to summer, you know, adults will have been vaccinated, will have made progress on treatments, will have made progress on vaccines for children, and hopefully going forward from that point we can kind of keep a lid on it, and potentially even the job, you know, the coronavirus job support scheme won't necessarily be something that we'll need. Interestingly, actually, I was just having a look to see what the sort of facts and figures were around sort of furlough and so on and so forth. Apparently 16.9% of private sector workers were on furlough as of January 2021. Be interesting to see how those figures relate into, you know, redundancies or jobs going forward as well. And also then sort of the economic cost of it all being about £50 billion. Well, you know, that's a huge amount of money, which actually probably leads us on to our next question. Is where are we going to get
the money from?
Which is what I think all of us, I know, like furloughs probably, especially for those workers that are on furlough now and are in some of those industries that aren't opening up until later on. But I do think that for the nation as a whole, trying to understand where this money is going to come from, especially for the younger generation. I mean, you know, there's a lot being said about how they're going to be paying for it for the rest of their lives. Well, possibly. So yeah, next point potentially is, where is the money going to come from? What are your thoughts?
It's a really good question. I personally think the government are likely to continue to borrow, because they've got a bit of a catch-22 as far as I understand it, which is if they put up, say, tax, national insurance and VAT, tax and national insurance, they are costs that the employer has to pay as well. So if you have a large number of your employees furloughed, you still have to pay that tax and national insurance. What we saw in the last round, particularly with the aviation industry, was a number of or mass redundancies because they couldn't afford to pay tax and national insurance for their employees as it was. So they had no choice but to make them redundant. Now, the question in my mind is, if the government does decide to put up tax and national insurance, how many companies are then not going to be able to afford to pay those taxes and keep their staff furloughed?
Yeah.
So it's difficult because there isn't any modelling, there isn't any projections that I've been able to find, but I expect that would hit a number of small and medium-sized businesses for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because just, I mean, you can't really, you don't know how much it would go up by, and so you can't really plan around it in that respect.
But don't you think also as well, pre-general election in December 2019, gosh, which seems like a lifetime ago, I'm fairly sure that Boris promised or pledged a triple tax lock on VAT, national insurance and tax. So I think he'd be hard pressed to go back on his word within less, just over a year of having made that pledge, although he obviously didn't have the benefit of hindsight at the time. But also, I think that on March the 3rd, to turn around and say to people, actually, we're going to raise tax and national insurance, it's not just going to hit the employer. I think that there are a lot of families, especially, that have been affected quite exponentially by coronavirus and hardships. And I think to know that you're going to lose, even if it's just 1% of your wages to tax or national insurance, for some people that could be the difference between surviving and not surviving. My personal opinion and hope is that, as much as I think we all think that this will happen at some point in the future, it's inevitable that, taxes are going to have to go up and people are going to have to pay for it. My hope is that this isn't the budget to announce it at. The government's got to put its people hat on. This has to be a budget for the people. It has to be a budget that helps people recover. So yeah, that's for me. But then actually, talking of that, wasn't VAT lowered towards hospitality last summer?
I think it was, yeah.
Because
I honestly don't see him targeting hospitality for VAT at the moment. It just, because hospitality is having such a hard time and they are going to be waiting to reopen, unless, I mean, I don't know when the changes likely come into effect from a budget. Do they come in?
I don't know. That's a good question. Now, if we were on the phone, I'd be Googling that frantically and I'd give you a really educated opinion on it. But I'm not, so I can't.
I can Google it, but maybe I shouldn't.
Quick, have a Google. I think it depends, doesn't it, with, I know, like, for example, when they put duty up on fuel or alcohol and things like that, it's kind of literally, one day it's one price and the next day it's the next price. I'm assuming with a budget you can put you can put dates in place for when you think things are going to happen, or so on and so forth. I also wonder,
I think that is usually how it works. He sets the dates in the budget of when things will be rolled out.
I do wonder, I know, like, I agree with you. I think hospitality is one area that really does need some help because it has been hit so hard. But then I also think, how much were the government lambasted for the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, as in it was kind of what kick-started the second wave. That's the general consensus of opinion. And it makes me wonder whether... and not that it, well, yes, it will have a direct impact on the client. Maybe putting that back to where it was is a way of trying to not censor it, but kind of curtail a mass exodus to hospitality in the summer. just a thought. I'm sure that anyone who's got a business in hospitality heard me say that probably wouldn't be very happy. But I think, it's really tricky, isn't it? As a government, you think they're not just looking at the economy and how, how that should operate. They've got to take so many things into consideration. I'm wondering, whether they're going to overthink it or just make it really quite simple, no furlough, a bit of duty on fuel and what have you, and Bob's your uncle.
It would be really nice to see if they've done the economic impact assessments.
Yeah.
I think that would give people a lot of confidence as well. But I mean, talking about the scandals, if you want to call them that, but the increase to universal credit, I mean, we saw numerous cases where it was the difference between somebody being able to get to work or not being able to get to work. And for those of us who can work from home, great, we don't have to pay commuting costs, but for other members of society who do still have to pay to get to work and have to pay for food and all of the other things that are associated with it. I mean, even working from home, you still have additional costs like printing costs, electric is additional, all of those things.
Food.
Yeah, food.
The fridge is literally like, 10 steps away now. It's making life hard.
I don't think it really matters how much a tax increase is to an individual at this point in time. I do agree with you that whatever he puts up, everybody is going to feel. But then I suppose coming back to tax again, that brings us to corporation tax.
Yes, do you know what? I think that, I mean, there's depending on what you read, it will depend on what people think about corporation tax being increased. I think that it will hit potentially small businesses, but similarly, bigger businesses that haven't fared so well during coronavirus. Okay, corporation tax is a tax you pay on your profits, but even still, a lot of businesses might need those reserves to keep people employed for however long, especially, as there's no knowledge of when furlough is going to end. I do think that talking of taxing on businesses, I think there will be some form of online sales tax or excess profits tax. There are some companies that have done extremely well over the last, I don't want to say out of coronavirus because that sounds awful, but Amazon for one, supermarkets for another. And I know we hear of the small gestures that some supermarkets have made to workers, like they didn't have to work Boxing Day and stuff like that. I just think, while we're all busily applauding that, it doesn't even come close to the amount of money that they have made. And actually, if they really wanted to do the right thing by their staff and their customers, if something is going to prevent people's own tax and national insurance being put up, it's taxing those companies that have made a killing off of COVID. So I was reading actually about an excess profits duty that was used after World War One. So wartime excess profits were measured against the company's pre-war average, and any excess profits were taxed at 50%. So this meant that if a company made £10,000 average pre-war profits, but £15,000 during wartime, the extra £5,000 would be subject to £2,500 of tax. And I just think, I think that's fair. I know it,
I think markets will find a way around that, though, Tara. I think they're onto it. I think they're onto you. I think they've been looking at your history. So I was reading this morning that the market value of all of these companies, well, not all of them, but a lot of them, like the online supermarkets, Ocado, which other ones was it? Just Eat, anything that's online and basically making a killing, their share prices or their market value has dropped significantly. this morning. I just think they can probably make an argument to say, well, yes, we had that profit, but now we don't, because the announcement of the economy reopening, people are starting to put their money back into other routes where they think that it will spring up again.
So I'm sure that they're probably sitting there thinking up their arguments, but I also think that a lot of the habits that people have got into because of coronavirus that have created convenience, I think they're going to stay. And I think Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Just Eat, online food shopping, Amazon, I just don't think they're going to go away. So I think that their argument's weak. It's flimsy.
True.
Sorry, I was just saying, why put all that energy and effort into a business model if you have no intention of keeping it going forward anyhow? And my concern is then, if that's the answer, is that this won't continue, that's just going to add to the redundancies issue. Do you know what I mean? It's a vicious circle. I don't see it happening, but I'm not always right. I could be wrong.
I don't know. I mean, often with these things, you kind of think you've got a handle on what's happening or what's likely to happen, and then it just changes, and you're kind of like, whoa, where did that come from? I think in terms of the budget, probably the worst case scenario would be if he decided to tax everything, like personal income tax, business tax, VAT, all of that stuff, and then just kept the furlough scheme going and was like, yeah, taxes will have to go up. I think that would be really bad. I mean, coming back to VAT for recruitment in particular, I do think that would depress the recruitment market if he puts it up, because it's something that bumps up the cost to clients significantly. 20% on if you have a salary, say, I don't know, of 25,000 or 30,000, and then you've got 20% VAT to pay on top of whatever the percentages you're paying the agency. It does make a difference to a lot of businesses, and obviously it will make a difference to the quality of candidates they're getting, because if they can't use an agency, they can't benchmark effectively. And obviously they don't want to use agencies at the moment in case they come across a great candidate from the agency. Obviously it's free to the point of placement, but if you're a business, a small to medium sized business, and you find a great candidate and you realize you can't afford them.
And again, that comes back full circle about the budget. I think the budget being about jobs, keeping people in jobs, keeping businesses as healthy as they can be, or giving businesses the opportunity to sort of grow again and to thrive again. So I mean, you're quite right about the VAT point of view, and I mean, recruitment is a, you know, it's a big one. Not only is it quite a, you know, it does obviously have its own GDP, its own contributory GDP, but it's all about that whole cycle of keeping people employed, and that's what we really need at the moment. You know, redundancies, redundancies in January were nowhere near what they were anticipated to be, and actually they weren't far off the levels of 2020 and 2019, but that's because we have furlough. The big thing we've got to work towards is how business looks when furlough ends. Although I did see in the BBC yesterday that 50%, according to CIPD, 50% of businesses are looking to hire, in the coming months, which is actually, it was over 50%. And I think that's really encouraging. I think the signs are there, but I think a lot of companies at the moment are probably hedging their bets and holding off pre-budget because, who knows what's going to happen. And I think that, going full circle on our conversation, for me, it all comes back to furlough. I think that until we know what furlough is going to look like, ambulance. So no, it takes us back to where it is. It's all about the furlough, isn't it? And how furlough, when it's going to end, how it's going to end, and it can't just come to a full stop. There's got to be an easing of it, surely. It'd be like falling off a cliff edge otherwise.
No, you can't. I don't think it's realistic or plausible to say the furlough scheme will just end here and, you know, whatever happens, happens. It really needs to be looked at closely, because it seems to me that it's such a fine balancing act at the moment, that everything is held together by really tentative threads, and the slightest change in one direction or another is people's livelihoods. You know, the decision that is made in government affects people directly on the ground. And
Yeah.
you're right, it can't just come to a cliff edge, because one, it's bad for people, but two, I don't think the government's position would be tenable if they just then pulled the hook out.
Actually, you did touch on universal credit. I think that is it £20 a week extra universal credit. I think that will definitely stay. And something else that someone mentioned the other day was about stamp duty. So obviously we had the level for stamp duty was raised. And I think a lot of people were hoping that might be extended, but I think from everything I've read, the extension is going to be short. And it's only going to apply to people that are in a chain or in a process. So yeah, that might put, and again, for me, that comes back to jobs, not just in that sector, but you know, we have seen a bit of an exodus of people leaving cities. London, I think especially, has felt that pinch. So maybe putting a sort of a bit of lid on that will keep people where they are. Which will help our cities thrive again. And we know that, you know, cities need people to thrive, and therefore we, you know, that's how we get jobs, isn't it? So it'd be interesting.
That's interesting. Stamp duty, you might not think that it has an impact on jobs initially, but as you've rightly pointed out, there are people who kind of working from home sort of think, oh, I'm in a stuffy flat in London, I'm in here 24/7. Actually, would it be nice? And I think particularly in some of the earlier lockdowns, when the stamp duty holiday was first introduced, kind of thought, actually, it might be nice to have a bit more space and maybe a garden, because I can get twice the property for the money of, or for the value. I can get twice the amount of property in the countryside than what I can get in London for the same price. And I think we did look at a report from that. It was saying something like 33% of Londoners wanted to move to a new home. And then of those that wanted to move, 46% want the home to be out of London, compared to the 43% who wanted to remain in the city. I mean, 46% is quite a lot. Even if it's only 33% of Londoners want to move. It is a lot of people.
It is when you consider the population of London. It's what, 11 billion or something, million rather, not billion. The whole of the world times 2 is in London, 11 million or something like that. But that's a lot of people, you know. That's what a sixth of the population lives in one area. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are lots of people that would like to have moved and probably have taken, I mean, you know, we all know people that have taken advantage of it. I think it's probably really helped keep an area of industry, or, you know, buoyant, or not even, buoyant, you know. But the other side to that is that it's probably also assisted the construction industry. You know, it's incredible when you sort of start digging into one thing that affects one particular industry. Like you say, there's just such a knock-on effect when you look at the bigger picture. So yeah, but no, I mean, stamp duty, I think from everything that I've read, that extension period isn't going to benefit anybody. I'm thinking, do I need to go out and put an offer in on a house in the Cotswolds somewhere now quickly before the 3rd of March?
Well, I think for those who maybe had some delays, or if they had delays in their chain, if they were in a chain, an extension will be much appreciated, and it will stop it just dropping off and being a cliff edge. I don't think the real estate sector would necessarily be too pleased if they suddenly had every sale planned falling through because the stamp duty holiday came to an end. But in terms of what that will mean for office space and jobs of the future. I mean, obviously we're all working from home because we're kind of forced to work. Well, we're not kind of, we are forced to work from home if we can. When things do start to open up again, it will change the landscape significantly in that capacity, because you will have people who have not moved out of London who then go back to the office, and then people who have moved out of London kind of thinking, well, if I can work from home, I would really prefer to, because I don't want to do an hour and a half or 2 hour commute in the morning and in the evening, so a total of 4 hours a day. And I don't think their employment contracts have been updated necessarily to reflect that they have the right to work from home so many days per week. But also there's a knock-on effect on team cohesion, because while everybody's working from home, you all have to do this remote thing to kind of communicate and keep the team together. But when only some are working from home, what you're likely to get is they will start to feel excluded, because there will be interactions in the office throughout the day that just you can't benefit from if you're working remotely. And so it's not a direct link, but it is a knock-on effect of people taking advantage or making the most of a stamp duty holiday if they're planning to move out of the city. And I do think that the impact of working from home, or the likelihood that it will continue as a set way of working now, is a little bit overinflated, I feel.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, from obviously, it's, you know, that's been a sort of common topic for since March last year, hasn't it? It's, you know, flexible working. Do you miss the office? Do you want to go back to the office? Da 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 da. I think there's a lot to be said for being able to have a bit of freedom or flexibility over how and where you work. But again, if I knew all my colleagues were in the office, I wouldn't want to be the one sat at home, because we all know it's so quick and easy to sort of talk to someone who's opposite you or wander over to someone. I do think that a sense of teamwork has been lost a little bit through remote working. I think initially the video conferencing was novel, it was quite fun, but I don't know about you, find it quite tiring. And I think that, you know, businesses will want to see their business back in the workplace. You know, how else do you know? I'm not saying how else do you know what everyone's doing, from the point of view that you need to be watching everybody and monitoring what they're doing, but, you know, how does I just don't see businesses functioning completely remotely, especially not where collaboration and creativity are really important. You just don't get that same sense when everybody's working remotely or part of the team are working remotely. And again, you know, if we all start working remotely, what does that mean for the construction sector, companies that rent out office space? You know, again, I think that making massive changes is just not the way to go, because for whoever benefits, I think more will suffer from it.
I think what it has done is kind of debunked the old excuses, if you like, that employers use, that it's not possible to do certain jobs from home, and flexible working requests or part work from home requests have been rejected on a basis that the lockdown working conditions have proved to be false, which is sad, but it seems that is the case.
Yeah. But in short, I think that our opinion about the budget is that it is going to be a people-friendly budget. We hope it's going to be a people-friendly budget, and we do think that, well, we hope that we'll all get some clarity on furlough, and that there won't be a cliff edge finish to it all. It will be more of a sort of staggered or drawn-out process. And I, hand on heart, I genuinely do not think that any government right now, because we are still, this is what people seem to forget, you know, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. I think because we're so looking forward to the future, I think it's very easy to forget that actually right here and now, and when the budget is announced on the 3rd of March, we are still in lockdown. So yeah, I think that any government that thought that the middle of a pandemic and lockdown was the right time to announce hikes in taxes and what have you would be mad.
Yeah.
Actually,
just one last point on that. I think it will be really interesting to see how the Chancellor manages to work the budget in line with the flexibility that's obviously necessary for the unlocking, because Boris last night was kind of deferring things. Well, that will be a question for the Chancellor, but if it's the case that we have a kind of date where you think that something's going to happen, say Easter, and actually as the data comes out and if it becomes apparent that it's not going to be plausible to open up at that date, it will be interesting to see how much flexibility the Chancellor can build into the measures that he is thinking of taking, because if he plans it around the unlocking in a fixed way, they're going to have terrible problems, because the two things are going to contradict, and then we're going to see these U-turns happening that we saw last year. So I really, just to sum up, coming back to your point about the summary, I do think he should go for August with the furlough scheme, although the papers are saying May. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think it's realistic for them to suddenly come out with an austerity type budget with cuts and tax hikes and things.
No.
We are in the here and now, in the middle of it still.
Yeah.
So yeah, it will be
fingers crossed.
Interesting to see what he comes up with.
Yeah, I think that there will be a hell of a lot of people that have probably previously only ever sort of like caught the highlights the day after. I think that on the 3rd of March, there'll be a lot more people tuned into his announcement. So we will see. I know that I will be, and I'm sure you will be as well.
Definitely, yep. And I think, yeah, the business world will be waiting with bated breath to see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Right, well, on that note then.
Thank you for joining us for our kind of a bit flighty discussion, but we hope that we got some valuable insights across there, or that it was worthwhile. And we will do probably another vlog soon, perhaps in a week or two. But yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Right. Okay. On that note, we will see you all later. Bye.